Hello and welcome to the Survivor's Corner podcast. I'm Kirk.
And I'm Jetwire. Thank you all so very much for joining us. And today we have a very special guest. Please welcome ToastyBits, who's here to talk about Sutherland's tale with us.
Hello? Is this thing on?
Testing.
Sorry, I've been trying to get
Toasty,
this
1,
radio
2,
to
3.
work. Am I talking?
You're good to go.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry, it took me a minute to get this radio working. Hi. This is my 6th appearance on this podcast, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you for inviting me again.
Absolutely.
We love to have you on, my friend. We
Yeah,
love to have you on.
of course. It's fun.
We like to have guests on, period. But yeah, you've
Mhm.
been
Yes.
you've been a great source of content with all the work you put into the lore and all the exciting stuff you do. So
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we should take a moment and say hi to chat before we jump into it. We have quite a lot of people here, so I will try my very best.
good luck.
We have Castle, Old Man Spiker, Esteen Island, Fox Gray, Sprocket Games, hello. Volcano, I think. Eddie, hello. Tobin Fox, Faye, Wandering Firekeeper, hey there. Grape Nut, Ian, that seems to be it for the. Oh, and Piccolo, hi Piccolo.
Piccolo, Esteen Island is here. Old Man Spiker, if we didn't say that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
thanks for joining us, guys. Should be a good one.
So essentially, today's discussion is going to be about part of the DLC and the trader Sutherland, and our resident lore expert's going to walk us through the story and what have you. So if you have any questions or you're concerned, not fully detailed on everything, by all means, drop a line. Maybe one of us can give you either a definitive answer or an opinion or whatever. A lot of the stuff is, based on very loose information that, that dug up through, looking at all the details and reading between the lines and what have you. So with that, we will turn this over to Toasty so he can tell us the tale of two brothers.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining, everyone. We appreciate it. So this is more or less like the last little bit of lore we haven't covered. Major lore topic. There's obviously smaller ones, but until episode 5 drops, this is it pretty much. So yeah, we have Sutherland's Tale, which has came out I believe a year ago, 2 weeks from now. Which was part of the final expansion update for the Tales from the Far Territory. This was a very interesting and unexpected bit of lore drop for the game because we were not aware that there was going to be a tale attached to it. We were always under the assumption there was only going to be 3 for the Rudiger's project, and then we had a 4th one. That was really nice surprise because it's actually kind of helped keep the channel kind of alive, my channel specifically, but it's helped quite a bit this last year. So there are technically 2 parts to this, and when I made my videos on it, I separated them into 2 different series. But I've learned this year specifically that serialized content is actually really bad for the algorithm. So what we're going to do is cover everything as quickly as possible. And we're going to do this in chronological order. So we're not going to do it. I'm not going to talk about it in the way that it's presented in the tale because it kind of jumps back and forth. And a lot of the information about this story is from the very beginning and it's dropped at the very end. I will warn you though, you will need to know a little bit about what's happening on Great Bear Island in terms of mysterious illnesses that are occurring in multiple places and in multiple time periods, because it is very important for this. So if you don't know anything about the Tales trilogy, the ones for Rudiger's project, or if you don't know what's going on in episode 4 at the very end with Perseverance Mills, you're going to get some spoilers here because it's kind of important. So with that out of the way, I can begin. And we can start with the general backstory for Sutherland and the other main character in the tale, his brother Wyatt. So they were both born in the Coastal Highway area. I don't think they were actually born in the Coastal Highway region that we know, because it's a name that may not actually be official. It's more of like a designation to the area that we use in the game. Um, and they both lived and grew up in the house called Misanthrope's Homestead. Now, do need to make a correction. The Misanthrope's Homestead is not named because of their father. It is actually because of Sutherland. That is something when I was rewatching all the videos, the conversations, he does clarify he is the misanthrope, and so I got that wrong in the previous videos. So that's interesting. So his father was not the type of person that hated people. It was Sutherland, which I believe he's the one that inherited the house after their father passed away. The brother Wyatt didn't really like the homesteads because he found it more open. Like, he didn't like to be out in the open. I get the feeling that he was more of a shut-in, not necessarily introverted, but like didn't like going outside. Wyatt ended up becoming a sort of like a writer, a designer, almost like a prophet in a way, and he designed and engineered the prepper caches that we see around the island. Not to confuse those with the bunkers from the Tales trilogy. The prepper caches are the much smaller, more personal ones that we can see in Winter Mute and in survival mode. He is the one responsible for those. And Sutherland was kind of the opposite. He was more about traveling the world, but more specifically the oceans. He had a deep love for the ocean, for the open seas, traveling on a boat, but he also didn't like people. So I wonder how that really worked, because he does mention that he's traveled on the big boats and he's gone to every ocean. So maybe he traveled with people like him. They don't like people, so they just leave each other to be while they travel and, explore the world. I don't know, but he's clearly well traveled and prefers to be away from home. He'd much rather be on a boat. So while the two brothers are very different characteristic wise, they still cared for each other. They still communicated with each other and knew about each other's, what they're doing in life. But at some point they both, kind of abandoned the home, more or less. So these two islanders grew up, I believe, during the 70s and 80s, maybe. We don't know their age, but we do know that Wyatt and his network of preppers were had a fear of like nuclear Armageddon. And I think that probably stems from the Cold War. So I think the 70s and 80s is probably a good, time frame for when they were growing up. They had the Cold War going on, the Red Scare and all that, the fear of nuclear annihilation. So the reason why these prepper caches existed is to protect the preppers from, nuclear war or any other threats that they perceived. And his prepper network included 3 other preppers, technically more, because he does mention an additional prepper in his tale, or in his notes. But Wyatt was followed by 3 other preppers. They were not really named, but they were given kind of like nicknames by Sutherland. We had the I think it was half-brained stockpiler, the trophy hunter, and the conspiracy nut. And if you're familiar with the bunker, or the bunkers, sorry, the prepper caches that you can find around the island, the 3 that are fully stocked are themed after these preppers, which is the reason why the preppers got overhauled and why they have a specific theme to them. One is the stockpiler, which is full of food and has the kitchen and has the recipe card. One is the trophy hunter, which is full of like animal trophies, essentially, guns and ammo and bows and animal skins. And the conspiracy nut is basically a conspiracy theorist. Their bunkers covered in notes and stuff like that, and general supplies. They even have a forest talker's backpack in it, which is rather interesting. I wonder if that maybe because they were a forest talker. I don't know. Um, I think that's more or less it about the backstory of the two brothers. So if we want to open up to questions, I did see Zach is in the chat, and I wanted to say hi. Hello, Zach. How are you doing? Thank you for joining.
Hey, Zach.
Of course,
And hello
everyone
to
else.
I
Thank
be,
you
I'll
for
be the
joining.
one also joined in, and the long
Yeah.
bark also just joined. Hey,
If we have,
stupid question, and I'll bring this up. Well, I
Mhm.
saw one from Castle, but there's 4 people involved with this. There's 9 prepper caches throughout the world, correct? So is there
In
a possi
survival, there's
yeah,
10. I think I know what
there's
the
10.
question
Okay.
is. There's
I
10 of
was gonna
them.
say, is there a
I w
bigger group here that maybe is or isn't a part of this, or
Maybe.
is it
I
more for the game to be randomized?
I believe so. This is I was going to bring this up in the second part.
Okay.
So Wyatt built his first prepper cache for someone named Tom Joplin, who was the side character in episode 3. He's mentioned in that. There's also a lore note about him as well. And it's the same prepper caches that you search in episode 3 as Astrid. One of those is the legacy cache we have in survival mode, the one that didn't get removed from the old system. Um, that's who that bunker belonged to, was Tom Joplin, and he got mentioned in the tale because that's where an important event happens in the tale. It wouldn't surprise me if he got contracted to make all these a lot of these caches, but there's technically more than the 10. I think it's fair to say that all of the ones that were there before are canonically there. I don't know why they would need so many, but like maybe it's, just in case one has to be abandoned. That's why they have the fail safe for the cache, and then they can move over to another one. There are other preppers mentioned in the lore, not necessarily directly tied to this main group of preppers that are involved with Wyatt. But in episode 2, you can run into Hank, who is a forestry lookout worker in Mystery Lake. He was the one that was essentially manning the one tower, the tower that hasn't been destroyed. He found the prepper cache just randomly, and so he started using it. It was abandoned, but it required a code, I think. I'm not entirely sure how that worked. Or maybe that was the other one, the Aurora hatch. But yeah, in episode 2, there's quite a bit of prepper caches you can visit. There's 2 of them. And then in episode 3 as well, you can visit some of Tom Joplin's ones. But yeah, Hank finds an abandoned prepper cache and uses it to stockpile stuff. He becomes a prepper because he felt like things are changing so much with the way the world is and the collapse. And you can find, his story in episode 2. And then you also have the Aurora hatch, which I believe was originally connected to Jeremiah, but they changed that with the Redux. So now it's completely uninvolved. It's not connected to him. I did talk about all the other preppers in one of my videos as well. I think it was part of the Preppers of Great Bear Island series. But yeah, there's quite a few other preppers in the lore that are not tied to this group, but they either got access to some of the preppers or just the caches or found them naturally, like Hank. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's more. Like they contracted Wyatt to make a prepper cache for them, but a majority of them are part of a network for the 4 of them, most specifically, with Joplin having his own like mini network in Pleasant Valley. Any other questions? I think that that answers that question.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, because I know there's quite a few of them, and who knows, maybe all
Mm-hmm.
4 of them were working together as, like you said, to contract out these things, and as they got further along, maybe the paranoia of, "Well, we're making all these ones, we wanna protect ours," and that leads
Mm-hmm.
into later into your story, so
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
protection plan. So
They definitely had the suspicion that people were getting word that there was a prepper cache network being built, and their fear was that these people would ask for help eventually, like when things got worse.
yeah.
It's all what if, like, oh, what if the bombs actually do drop or something else happens? People are going to start begging for help, and so the failsafe was a measure to combat that. I'll answer the radio question in a bit. What, like Sutherland's radio? That's a good one. I will mention it here. So I don't know when these caches started being built, but it had to have been a while ago, like decades probably. I get the feeling that maybe the caches have been around for a while, but the fail safe is probably something that was introduced later in time, because there's a lot of these caches. There's potentially dozens of them all across the world if you include the older survival mode ones, and the newer ones. And so what happened was, yeah, I think I'm just kind of speculating here. The group found out that people learned about the prepper caches, and so they decided to create the failsafe, which is an explosive that would destroy the hatch and render the prepper cache fully sealed. I don't know why you would want to do that, in case if you're inside or outside, but you basically get stuck inside or you lose access to the cache. And so the failsafe was actually problematic to build because it wasn't something Wyatt was used to. Sutherland does make a note of that it wasn't his style. And so the notes left behind by the preppers, the three prepper friends, quote unquote, I wouldn't call them friends when you learn what happens later. They pressured Wyatt. They really forced him to try to get it fixed, almost like they were sitting around doing nothing, and Wyatt was struggling to get it to work. But Wyatt, I think he was very much like Sutherland, not Sutherland, very much like Rudiger, kind of blinded by his work, focusing on trying to get it done and complete his goal. So he had no idea what was happening in the background. Wyatt was just focusing in on getting the failsafe done, no matter how much pressure was put on him. Meanwhile, the prepper group, the friends, were planning essentially a coup, kind of a way to get rid of Wyatt. And the plan was to get rid of him once the failsafe was done. They were never really his friends. They just used him. They saw him as like a prophet almost. They praised him. They kind of worshipped him in a way, like in a weird cult way almost. But I think that was all just a show to get Wyatt to essentially do what they say, all claiming all of it was to protect themselves, to keep them safe from any threats really. But it was all just a giant ruse to get Wyatt to build the prepper caches and to make them as safe as possible. Sutherland knew about all this. This is why we're telling this in sequential order, because Sutherland was very much aware that he was building the failsafe. He knew about the explosives. He knew that there was going to be a meeting one day with the four prepper friends. He knew all of it. But the reason why we're saying it, we're discussing this in order, is because Sutherland has a broken mind, and it may or may not be related to what's been happening on the island in multiple locations in multiple time periods with a certain disease. But when we get to the final part of the tale, the actual like meat of the tale, when we're actually talking to Sutherland, you get all of the telltale signs that he's afflicted with something that we are familiar with. And so Sutherland knew there was going to be a meeting, and the meeting took place in Joplin's bunker, his first one, the one that we can see below the rope climb to Timberwolf Mountain. So that is officially the first one that was ever made. The meeting went about as planned, well as the preppers had planned. They were going to kill Wyatt. They did that by setting him on fire. I can't imagine a more horrific end, but it sounded really bad, really bad. And yeah, that more or less proves that they were never friends with him. Like, if they even cared about him an ounce, they could have just shot him to, put him down quickly, but they didn't. I think the way that the manner that they put him down like that really proves that they had no heart and they had no actual love for Wyatt. They were never friends with him.
I wonder.
Sutherland, go ahead.
Let me throw something in there, just because because what you're saying with them burning him. I wonder if they
Uh-huh.
were trying to set it up to look like an accident.
Ye
He was
maybe.
working with explosives, he's trying to do all this stuff.
Mhm.
Maybe they rigged the room with flammables so that when, it would ignite
Yeah.
and the explosives would go off, and then that way, if there were, granted, we don't see anything of any kind of police force on Great Bear
Mhm.
Island, but obviously there would have been some kind of law enforcement of some sort.
Yeah.
That way, when they came to investigate, you know, they would have looked at this and went, "Oh, this was an accident."
Maybe,
Food for
but
thought.
they left clues all over the island with their note stashes, which it is weird that they're gone, the three preppers, but they left behind evidence. So I don't think they were really planning that ahead, that far ahead. Definitely not. Um, but who knows? No, we have no idea what exactly happened. We just know that they burned him alive, which is a horrific way to kill someone. Um, but yeah, we know that Sutherland knew about the meeting and he ended up actually going. This is the part that is kind of like the big reveal at the end. Sutherland went to the meeting location and found Wyatt already dead, charred to death, and he left a note. Um, that was a huge surprise. It's kind of the twist that kind of makes you finally understand what's going on with Sutherland. His brain is falling apart. He knew about the meeting. He knew that Wyatt was dead, and he even says at the end it kind of alludes to the fact that he wasn't surprised that he knew, but more surprised that he forgot, that he couldn't remember it. And in some of his conversations, he even says he's loopy. He needs to wake up. He can't remember anything. Everything's kind of just like fading in and out. Um, that concludes Wyatt's part of the story, more or less. So Wyatt or Sutherland leaves the note, and there had to have been a long period of time between when Wyatt died and when we talked to him in survival, because the body is a skeleton, and the game does note that it's charred when you pick it up, but the model obviously doesn't reflect that. I think it's just because they're reusing assets, but there's no signs that it was burnt. There's no signs that there's been decay of whatever was left over. So there had to be some time. Also, someone had to have built that wall, and that was probably Sutherland. It definitely wasn't Joplin or anyone else. It was Sutherland. It's never mentioned in the tale, but the only way that that body could have stayed back there without anyone noticing is is from Sutherland. He was the one that had to have built that wall. So there had to be plenty of time. We know that. Sorry, needed to burp, and I don't want to burp in the microphone. We know that he has the leg injury, and um, the leg locks up in the winter. And then obviously there's the whole wildlife situation happening following the first flare. I I think this was well before Wintermute, well before the Quiet Apocalypse started, because there had to be time for him to build the wall. Obviously, had to get there on foot through, somehow to get to Pleasant Valley, which was more accessible at one point before Wintermute, thanks to the Forest Talkers.
Yeah, he may have been
Uh,
able to drive part of that at
yeah,
that
he probably
point.
drived partway through, most likely, because the avalanche that blocks you from the highway wasn't there a couple weeks before the first flare. Um, and he had to build the wall. He had to probably go get the material too to get the wall, which is interesting. So I guess Joplin wasn't really around, but Joplin was noted as like a definitely crazy, losing his mind type of old man, like really old man, probably older than Sutherland. So he was probably nowhere to be found, was unaware that any of that happened. He was uninvolved with that. Sutherland did note that Joplin was probably the only true friend Wyatt had, because he never betrayed him, which is good because, like, Tom Joplin was such a minor character before this, but I kind of like his story a lot more now because we actually got an expansion to it, and he's just like a random side character that was really unimportant to the main story of the game. But now we have a really good idea of who Tom Joplin really was at one point, and he wasn't a bad person, fortunately. Um, and yeah, I think the wall gets built. Sutherland leaves. Some time passes. Who knows how long? Could be a couple months. Could be many, many years. But the skeleton is a skeleton. There needed to be some time for it to fully decay, and I don't know. I don't know anything about like how long it takes for bodies to decay, but there are some bodies in the game that are skeletons and some that are not. So, and there definitely have been a couple corpses that we've come across that have been there for many years and they're still intact. I don't know how you explain that. Um, do we want to take up more questions?
You can. You can break
Yeah,
where you like. I was
yeah,
gonna
because
s the one of the things I was gonna point out too was that maybe some of his forgetfulness beyond just the whole, affliction from what's going on in Perseverance Mills is the grief part of it too. I mean,
hmm
he discovered his brother, and so by building the wall and basically entombing him in that part of the bunker, you know, it's not completely unconceivable for him in his grief to just compartmentalize it in his mind and turn it off. Because, like you said, during the tale of him rediscovering what he had done with the note and everything, he seemed shocked by it, but yet it may be just opening up a memory that he had locked away and completely, shoved in the corner of his mind and forgot about.
hmm Yeah, for sure. It's kind of similar to Grey Mother, how she, she's old. I think she's losing her memory because she's old, but she also had an extreme trauma as well, and her mind it was essentially blocking that. But she needed to be reminded of her daughter in order to kind of carry on. Um, reflecting on the past essentially and cherishing those memories that she locked away
And that's
unintentionally.
and that's a
I
good
think
way
that's
to remember that in
mhm,
that sense too, because you're tying that storyline so the stories kind of follow that same thing of loss and trust
mhm.
and some of the overlying themes that come over again and again throughout the whole game.
Yeah, and in any apocalypse themed game, I guess there's always those themes of trust, loss, grief, perseverance, those sorts of things. But some of this happened before, which is very unfortunate. Before the world ended, but it's very in line with these sort of things, these sort of types of stories. Um, yeah, at this point we're basically at the point where we can like talk about the conversations because there's multiple sets of them, and then the main bulk of the actual tale, like you going back and forth looking for the caches, which we can, we all know what that entails. It's a long and tedious process. Um, but yeah, we basically just jump forward to survival mode. This is, I think, the reason why the trader doesn't show up immediately is because he needs to build his radio. We don't know how long it is after Wintermute, but it's definitely a while after for survival mode to actually start. Sutherland doesn't have a radio, and he specifies that he had to fix this one up to put it together essentially in order to communicate. He doesn't like people, and he never had a need for a radio, so he had to scavenge for one and put it together. And so after doing that, he reaches out for the first time days or weeks later after the survival game starts and is looking for someone, anyone really. He has two main goals when he first talks to you. One, try to trade with someone so that he can get the supplies he needs, and two, look for someone that he can trust to find his brother. And that's like the main purpose of Sutherland. He's the trader one, and then he's got the special quest line essentially for the tale. Um, and he also has two different sets of conversations. One is more of like an introductory one, and then the other one you get when you have higher trust with him. He kind of opens up a bit. If you talk to him about certain topics before you gain enough trust, he kind of gives you the sense that he's a little upset that you're asking about it. some things are a little more personal to him, like the misanthrope's homestead and his leg. Um, so throughout these conversations, when I went through them again earlier today, I flagged many different parts of them that have what I call red flags, essentially. Moments in his conversations that display a deviation from the conversation, um, thoughts that are kind of not relevant to what's happening, or he's confusing different memories, or he's talking about things in a broken way, like his conversation's not cohesive anymore. All of a sudden it becomes hard to follow, essentially. So I'm trying to find one really good one. I think there's definitely one. Okay, I think this one is the strongest uh, response he gives you. It's about his hurt leg. He says, "Old injury, heavy cables came loose on our ship, hit me like a bullwhip, nearly took it clean off, locks up on me in the winter. And then there's a shift. Or was it after I came back? Wyatt was in a mood. Maybe that was it. Yeah. You see now. Do you see it? Or do you get it? My brother, I think it was him. No." So this is really important for anyone, going through the tales, all four of them, including the trilogy and then Sutherland's. When he's talking like perfectly like not unlike me, because I can't talk apparently. I'm trying to here. When he talks in a cohesive manner, like his thoughts come across well thought out, he remembers what he's talking about. It usually involves water because he's a seafarer, he's traveled the world. He would rather be on his boat than live in his house. He would rather die to the fishes in the water than be in a wolf's belly. When he talks about something familiar like that, something he cares about, he sounds like a normal person. Like his mind is intact. But when his mind starts to wander, you see that even in like the grammar, like the sentence structure, the way that he speaks, it suddenly falls apart. Like he's confusing what he's talking about with something else. So he says that the heavy cables from a ship hit him in the leg, but then he suddenly blames Wyatt for it, but he's saying it in a confused way. That, I think, might be the biggest indicator of what is happening to him. Not only is he obsessed with water, but he's also talking about it like as if nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden he deviates from what he was saying, but his manner of speaking changes. I think that alone is why I think he is afflicted with the Langston mind disease or the perseverance disease, whatever we want to call it. It's the same thing that everyone else in Perseverance Mills and then the Langston mine are suffering from. And that may make his backstory kind of suspect, like you can't trust it. But I think it's the way that he's talking about his backstory that makes me believe it, that actually happened. When he's talking about like he's traveled the world, he's gone to all these different oceans, he loves to be on ships out in the open sea. That is a mind that is functioning, a mind that it knows what it's trying to say, but then it breaks when he talks about anything else. Water, I think, is like the key indicator for what is happening with everyone, with anyone afflicted with this disease, because it's like in one of my videos I've concluded that it's because it's something that we all have around us all the time, hopefully throughout our entire lives, and so we generate memories with water. Water is key to life. We go swim in it on a nice sunny day. We drink it when we need it to survive. Sometimes we have good memories, sometimes we have bad memories with it, but it's a memorable part of our life. It is a part of our experience as humans, as living beings. So I think the mind just has that fixation whenever they're trying to focus on something specific. And in the tales, they're doing that because they need to in order to keep their mind focused. They're trying to write about anything they can think of, and water consistently comes up. And Sutherland already was, a seafarer. He's already like enjoying life out on the ocean. So water just comes up naturally. It's the thing that he loves the most. And so I think that, and then the broken, deviated conversations, shows us that he is suffering from this same affliction that is happening all over the island in 2 different locations and in 2 different time periods. But we don't know where he got it from. I'll stop there in case if someone has a question, because we're dipping into Tales trilogy territory here.
Yeah, and I see some comments here on that.
Mhm.
It's, Wandering Filer Keeper is Sutherland's losing it, coming up with a new story each time. Is like the Joker telling how he got those scars. And then
Yeah.
Tobin is saying this is like a cat is naturally drawn to running water, preferred to still water.
Yeah.
So
Mhm. Yeah, I think that is probably the best explanation for why even the security chief, even Rudiger, why they're drawn to water, is because it's kind of ingrained in us as a living thing. Water is safety, water is life. Water can also be dangerous. There's also those 2 side quests from episode 4 that of these people that have clear indicators that they were in the Langston mine at some point during all the events that happened there. They also mention water in their notes, that they see water running in their head, that they're writing to stay focused, to keep their mind sharp. I talked about everything relating to episode 5 in a recent video, and I also talked about them in what's it called? In the previous video I released last week for the Darkwalker. Strange how it's connected though to the Darkwalker, the Tales, but you'll have to watch that video to know what I'm talking about. But I recently talked about those 2 side characters from episode 5. Water is kind of strange. It's like a red flag. If it comes up randomly in conversation anywhere in the game, I think it's, if you also see the other signs, like their mind is, foggy or whatever, and they seem to misremember things, and water is also mentioned, they're definitely sick with whatever this disease is. Nadia joined. Welcome, Nadia. I think at that point we're like at the very tail end here. Because we can just skip like through the process of finding the caches, and there's no point in talking about it.
Yeah,
But what the
everybody kind of
cache,
knows that.
and we've already kind of gone over what the caches had. It's just the notes from Wyatt talking about how he needs to get this failsafe done. He's even pressuring himself to get it done. He's just like hyper fixated on it, almost blinded by his own ambition of getting it done. But in the meantime, the other notes from the preppers are them they're basically yelling at Wyatt in the notes, even though they're written, yelling at him to get it done. They mention that some people are getting word that the prepper caches exist, and that they have the fear of other people learning about it and trying to ask for help. And then finally, their decision to have that meeting with Wyatt to get rid of him. So you get to the end of Sutherland's tale. After you've done all of the special requests, he gives you, his thoughts on the notes. I can't remember exactly what he says in between. Like you deliver the notes, and he finds it strange that they have the schematics, and you also learn about how the failsafe works through those. But you get to the end, and you deliver Wyatt's corpse and the note, and he more or less says he's not surprised that he knew about it, because he knew deep down that he knew, but he couldn't remember. He kind of breaks down in a couple of places in the tale, where he's like upset that he can't remember. Like he loses his thought process for what he's trying to say. But his note reads like a perfectly well put together person. The Sutherland we know in the tale is very different from the Sutherland's note, the actual note you find next to Wyatt. Like, it's more emotional, it's more cohesive, um, and does, you know, tell a little bit more about Sutherland and Wyatt and their relationship. How Wyatt was always telling him to write, and well, this was the one time he decided to write something meaningful and left it next to Wyatt. Um, so rediscovering that his brother was dead was kind of the tipping point for Sutherland. Like, it opened up everything. He suddenly remembers everything, and having that reminder, I think, is really important. And it like I mentioned earlier, it comes up in episode 1. Grandmother had a really foggy mind. I don't think she's afflicted with whatever's happening on the island, whatever's happening in Perseverance Mills. I think it's just old age, but having a reminder of your past is really important for you to get through any trauma or grief, or just trying to like relive the old days. Like, that's just really important,
It's
because
a
if you can't
trigger.
remember, if you can't remember, just seeing something can trigger it, and it could be emotional, it can be traumatic to relive that. um but yeah, that happens in multiple places in the game. And then Sutherland's final request: just take Wyatt back and bury him. Using the failsafe to trigger the explosive, you essentially lock the prepper cache away forever. You can't use it again. And when you come back, I don't remember exactly what he says, but he just kind of,
It's very anticlimactic.
it's an
It's yeah,
anticlimactic ending. The twist is I think the true finale. The climax of the story is the true finale, in my opinion, which is not how you should write a story. I think the ending could have been a little better, and also the rewards, but we're not talking about the rewards for the tale for the special requests. Um, but yeah, it's a really sad tale, because these two, they lived their life on Great Bear Island. Sutherland left and came back, and even notes that a lot of islanders leave, but most of them don't come back. And he's one of the few that we know of that did come back. We know that I believe Sarah Easton from Pleasant Valley and Barbara Quincy from Coastal Highway, they did leave and came back at some point. And Wyatt was the type that just wanted to be away from it all. Wasn't, all about living on the coast, being out in the open. He wanted to live underground, and, had the fear of the world ending. And so these two brothers just wanted to live their lives, but unfortunately kind of all got turned upside down. It's always one, or in this case 3 bad apples that create such tragic stories for innocent people to live through. But
there were a run of questions here if you're ready to do that.
That more or less concludes the whole tale. Some people probably showed up late. That's fine. We can go over something in a question if you want.
Yeah.
His voice caresses my ears. Oh no. Please no. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes,
SF.
Sam. This is Toasty
Yeah,
Bits.
Sam.
And
welcome.
And you're going to be docked for being late.
Yeah, we can open up the rest of the rest of the podcast for questions at this point.
Yeah, so
this tale's much shorter, but yeah, there's plenty to talk about, of course.
Yeah, Piccolo says, do we know how actually the bunkers themselves were built?
No, we don't.
There's really not.
I'm assuming they dug out the ground and just built the first room and kept going from there. I don't know how bunkers like that are usually built.
There probably was a lot of supply runs to Port Mary.
Yeah.
There's a lot of brick in some of these.
Because a lot of them were built in Pleasant Valley. They have the main road that goes to the highway, which I'm assuming leads to Perseverance Mills, but Port Mary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they could just drive up there.
And was probably during a lot more affluent times too. Money must
during
have
the
been a
summer,
little,
most
yeah,
likely, as
little
well.
easier, yeah, during summer
Hmm.
and that.
Yeah, we don't know much about how they were built. The only part we know is the failsafe, the explosive measure. Promise to behave for the rest of the podcast. All right,
We'll
we'll
hold
make
you to
note of
that.
that. Okay, let's. I'm gonna look for actual questions above. Let's see. Yeah, something Sutherland's radio also works while you're in one of the DLC regions with Glimmer Fog. That is definitely a what do you call that? Like that has to be a bug for sure. Because that shouldn't work for sure. Because Sutherland doesn't have power if he's out in the ocean. Unless he's like on the edge of the far territories in the ocean, which we don't know where the ocean is in respect to the far like how far away. But yeah, his radio should not work when you're in the far territory in a Glimmer Fog.
And they
It's
really
kind of
don't
odd.
go over where he disappears to be in between trades
Mm-hmm.
either. You know, it's like
He's just out. He's just out in the water somewhere looking for stuff.
and I'm sure there's a lot out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does say in his conversations he's searching through drifting or floating containers and drifting ships. Just anything that was out in the ocean in the middle of the flare is all fair game for him. And yeah, he can't walk, but like there are no wolves on the ships, so it's safer for him to walk, to stumble around looking for stuff. Nadia asks, I think Sutherland mentioned his brother when telling story about his leg because he kind of remembered that it prevented from getting to Wyatt in time. Yeah, I that's actually the example I brought up earlier of a specific conversation that showed a very clear red flag for how the state of Sutherland's mind. It starts with him talking about the cable that disconnected from the ship and hit him in the leg. That's how he got his injury. But then he talks about Wyatt and saying that he's the one that caused the injury, kind of alluding to that. That's the fact. The way he breaks from the conversation and just starts stumbling through nonsense, that's different. I think that part, there's many different sentences here that I've highlighted, these red flags. I don't believe any of that stuff. I think that's his mind just having a brain fart, essentially.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, like, how much of
Mhm.
your the conversation with him do you feel is actually like real, and how much of
Yeah,
it is invented?
quite a bit of it is definitely. I wouldn't say it's invented. He's just confusing multiple memories or you know false memories even,
Hmm.
and trying to connect it with what he's talking about. Yeah, just to reiterate, anytime he speaks like in a normal manner, cadence, whatever, that's the part of his story that I believe. So I believe his backstory because it's very cohesive. But when he
Hmm.
like breaks from the conversation and says, "Oh wait, I think it was my brother," or maybe not, that's when he is, yeah, that's when he's a little, he's
Well, and he
drifting
sounds
away
like you
from
said,
what
like
he's
it
saying.
starts to have that reminiscence of Grey Mother, where they're, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the memories are getting mixed with present day versus what was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get to the point where the trigger
Mm-hmm.
finally
I
brings all these memories together.
I wouldn't say that's happening to Grey Mother. That's the one key difference is she she has a foggy memory, but I think it's just old age or maybe even just the trauma is kind of
I
like
wasn't
blocking that.
implying that it was
Yeah.
you know, the whatever's going
Hmm.
on with the device and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but more or less the same theme. It's just that whole
Yeah. Yeah.
where
She's not.
memories can be, you know,
Mhm.
they can be very vague, and then, like you said, the trigger point comes in
Yeah.
and it like clarifies that.
Hmm. Yeah. She's definitely got her own memory problems, but they're not quite the same. Um.
Mhm. Rhino Max is asking, is the point of disagreement bodies Wyatt's crew? They fought and had it out there. So, and I
That is
don't think there's anything pointing in the lore there, but it sounds like a
no.
good theory.
I've heard of that before a couple of times. I kind of like it as a
Yeah.
possible explanation, but the trucks are on top of the snow, I think that must have happened at the moment of the first flare.
People
Mhm.
that knew about the bunkers and were headed there.
Yeah, and it is near Joplin's bunker and near the other bunker, obviously. But yeah, the events in Joplin's bunker had to have been a while before the first flare, before the Quiet Apocalypse.
And it was a small,
Well,
very tight-knit community, so people would have talked. People would have
Hmm.
known things.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's kind of gross too, but I mean, the condition that you find Wyatt's body in, I mean, he's in essentially like a sealed container, so that kind of decomposition would have taken a long time
yeah.
if
That's
we
why I
just
think
have skeletal remains at that point.
that's because he was fully burnt by the time he found the
Yeah,
body.
yeah.
Sutherland found the body, and then yeah, some time. It looks like a skeleton, but I think realistically it would be charred remains with the
Mhm.
skeleton, and ash and all that. Yeah, so that's why I think it's definitely been maybe a year or 2 or 3 maybe since it all happened. He's just out of the loop. He doesn't recall any of it because his mind is just kind of you know it's not quite
All over.
pieced together
Yeah,
correctly. It's very
yeah.
possible that he acquired the affliction well after Wyatt died, and so he's just trying to remember what happened to him in the tale.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, Another good question from Wandering Firekeeper. He's asking, do you think Sutherland will survive out there for a year so we can hear him again over the radio in Black Frost?
Um, Probably. I don't even think he would be able to hear him because he's very much stuck on the island, as stuck as you are. He's just allowed to be in the water, and he
Yeah,
won't
so
he won't
I
let
mean,
us get in the boat either because he doesn't like people. I mean, his boat probably has room for more than one person, but he doesn't want people on the boat. But I
yeah,
think
I
it's
was
a
going to
it's a
say,
matter of like if the radio can actually reach the mainland. We don't know,
yeah,
and he
yeah,
has a radio that's barely functioning.
mm-hmm. And his boat's like a little boat too. I don't think it would
Yeah,
survive like actual like ocean currents and things like that. So
yeah,
he's probably pretty tied to the island.
yeah.
Yeah, he even mentions that.
He specifically states his boat will not survive ocean conditions, and he knows what ocean conditions are like because he's been out in the ocean. It would not survive.
And then the other thing too is with shortwave. I know a little bit about this, but
Hmm.
shortwave has to do with broadcast signal and bounce. So you're actually bouncing the signal off the ionosphere of the
Hmm.
Earth, and then it bounces back and forth. So obviously, the stronger the signal, the more bounces you get. So with the small radios that they're using in these, scenarios, they're probably getting maybe one or two bounces, and it's
Hmm.
not going to go far. You're going to get tens of miles, maybe 100 miles, but depending on the distance between where Harmart lies and where Great Bear lies, which we don't know at this
Hmm.
point, we don't think they're going to be have enough. Maybe like Signal Hill under full power, maybe.
Yeah.
But again, shortwave distance is based off the amount of watts that you're broadcasting at and the number of bounces you get off the ionosphere.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it's Mio or Mio. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Please correct me. Yeah. Black Frost might take place in Ontario, which actually I think is more or less confirmed through Raphael. This is a comment he left on Reddit one day, but it was originally about a conversation about if we will expect to see all the items from the first game and the second game. Bad news. Most likely not. There would probably be a lot of new item models, essentially. But he compared Great Bear Island to Vancouver Island, which is out on the west coast of Canada, and Harmont to like northern Ontario, specifically northern Ontario industrial cities, which I'm not familiar with, but I think that confirms we are in Ontario for Black Frost, which is several hundreds of kilometers away, or thousands maybe. I don't even know kilometers that well. Yeah, it would not reach. But would he survive? As long as he has our survival character around, I think yeah. But if he's afflicted with this disease from either the Langston Mine or Perseverance Mills, he might not last long. Especially if he's from Perseverance, if he got it from Perseverance Mills, and he doesn't know he's supposed to be writing to try to keep focus, to try to last a little longer,
Hmm.
he might not last long.
And
Which
it
is
doesn't account for anything going wrong either.
Mhm.
one injury, one infection,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another thing too you have to think about too is currently he can communicate with people
Mhm.
because we went and fixed all the radio transponders. But if you remember from whenever we got to Forsaken Airfield, it did say in the lore note
Mm,
that they go bad very, very quickly.
no. I'll correct you there. We
Oh,
don't need the transmitters to talk to Sutherland because the transmitters are for signal triangulation. This comes up a lot,
okay.
and I have to clarify it because we have two different radio networks on the island that are connected, but
Hmm.
they work on different hardware. The
Okay.
transmitters are for locating signals, like the bunkers or the transmit ponder caches, or the aircraft. They have their black boxes.
Gotcha.
That's how you look for those signals. The radios that you find in living rooms and in kitchens or whatever, those are picking up signals from the radio relay towers, like the big ones that you find in the muskeg, or just
Okay.
all over. There's a bunch of them, but you see three of them in the muskeg. Uh, those are picking up, music or news or whatever. And then the radios that we have that were just added last year with Broken Silence, those also work on the towers, the radio towers. Transmitter towers and the radio towers are different, but
Okay.
I think they're part of the same network, but the transmitters are separate. It's the hardware that matters. The transmitter hardware is very fragile.
Gotcha.
So that,
We
we
also
don't
know
need
that
to fix anything technically
and we
for
also know
Sutherland.
that the Aurora has differing strengths that tends to blow out electronics too.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, which I hope to see maybe have an effect in Blackfrost. It would be really interesting to see, like, this radio tower stopped working because the last Aurora burnt it out, so we have to replace parts. That would be kind of cool.
that would be an interesting twist
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
order to keep talking to him.
Toasty, do you have a video or video series going through all the notes through the Sutherland's Tale notes? Yes, I did those last year and early this year. Sutherland's Tale is a 6-part series, I think, and then the Preppers of Great Bear Island is the Wyatt half of the story, plus all the other preppers from throughout the
Yeah.
lore.
Yeah. I
That's a
believe your
3-part series.
Sutherland playlist is in a link in the description
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
So,
If you can link the Preppers of Great Bear Island one as well, because that's related to the Sutherland's Tale.
Plus, if you go to his channel, he's got all his playlists pretty
Hmm.
well laid out. So
Yeah. If you type in the Long Dark
easy to navigate.
lore, if you type in the Long Dark lore on YouTube and try to filter playlists, I think you can do that. I think basically all of mine come up, and you'll just need to find the correct one. There's, like, I want to say 10 or 12 different playlists, but they're all named correctly. Like, one is about buffer memories, one is about Wintermew, one's about the different tales. But yeah, I've covered all of this as of, like, January of this year at this point. And since then, I've just been trying to figure out what to do, because there's not. I'm done with the lore as of, I think, October.
wow.
I tried to stretch it out as much as I could, but I've covered basically everything. That's why I started working on a new game, lore series, Raft, which hopefully you guys will play at some point, and I could join. I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing some Raft lore to just kind of space out the Long Dark lore videos, which I've now passed. Also, Black Frost helps talking about that, just filling in the gaps until episode 5 releases, which hopefully will be soon,
Yeah.
very soon.
Here's two questions that kind of fall into the same answer here. So let me read these.
Mhm.
This is Only Franco says, "Where does Sutherland get all these items for trade? Does he keep finding 10 pristine bags of flour floating out at sea? And then, is it amazing how notes and things survive for 30 years and can be found in the tales from Old Man Spiker?" So this is all down to, I think, Toasty's best line in all of this is
Because
because
game.
game.
Yeah.
There's
It
no, yeah, you can't,
yeah,
you
there's
got,
no
this
way
is where you
he's
got to draw the line between
Mhm.
game fantasy and reality. There's,
Yeah. Yeah, there's no way he's finding 10 perfectly conditioned bags of flour. There's no way the notes plastered all over Milton after the collapse have been there for a decade without falling apart. It's you just kind of have to abandon all reality when it comes to that sort of thing.
Just pretend
It's
they're
just
laminated.
yeah,
Yeah, they're very well
yeah,
preserved.
including the flour bags.
Because there's
Right.
the one note that's on the water tower in
Yeah,
episode 1 that's
it's been there for a
definitely been
decade.
there for decades, so, yeah.
Mhm.
Like I
It's
said, they're laminated.
And he's getting all of his traded items through like floating containers and ships. It's just all stuff that's floating around because, ships stopped working at some point during the first flare. And and there was also a blizzard that first night, and then a blizzard a couple nights later in episode 3. So yeah, any all those ships probably just got tossed around, containers falling everywhere. And
so
if they're
here's
water locked, that like they're locked
yeah,
tightly and there's no
usually
water
sea
getting in.
containers are sea
Yeah.
tight or watertight, but
Hmm.
here's 2 other things to think about too. You have mentioned this several times when I've, been played through, and we all have, and that is, how do you find 100% corn or ham or whatever when you're out and about that is 20 years old?
Uh-huh.
Same thing
Yeah.
in the
The
game.
corn
You
the
find all this stuff that is in perfect condition,
I
you
would
know.
stay away from the corn and the ham in the game. Unless you get it from unless you get the corn from Sutherland.
By
The
the
corn
same
and the
token,
ham, you only find it in places that are involved with the Tales trilogy, Rudiger's project. It has been 3 to 4 decades since then. I would sooner trust the sardines at last resort than the ham at the bottom of the Langston mine.
so that's the thing you gotta weigh into with this whole
Yeah.
reality thing.
And
You find a dead rabbit that's 100% fresh, and you know that nobody's lived in this house for 2 decades, so
yeah,
that falls into that whole category of because
because game.
game.
Yeah.
And then, the same token of, if you really think about it, and we've talked about it on this podcast before, this is happening worldwide. How many
Mhm.
container ships, how many people on sailboats and pleasure yachts are all caught out at sea? This is, it's going to be interesting to see if we get any information about how the rest of the world is, but a lot of people got stranded out in the middle of the ocean. I mean, imagine a big container ship on its way from one country to the next, and they're
Yeah,
thousands
cheap.
of miles away from anything, and they're stuck.
Mhm.
Yep.
Imagine
Cheap
being an
Town Breaks
go
says
for it.
there's a floating Costco container. Yeah, it's a floating Costco container ship. There you
Yeah.
go.
I love that. It was heading to Vancouver, but it yeah, had some trouble along the way.
Yep. Yep.
I was gonna add, imagine being an astronaut and the first flare hitting.
Oh
If
no.
if for some reason the satellites in space are safe from this, you're still boned because you
Yeah.
will die in space. You will die eventually when you run out of food or water or whatever. Well, they might have some way, at least in modern times, might have some ways to grow food up there and recycle water. But if anything goes wrong, someone has a heart attack on the space station, there's a malfunction, you are dead. There's
The
no way
mental
back
strain
to Earth.
alone.
Yeah, that it probably killed a couple of astronauts. But I imagine if airplanes flying midair were affected, and that's a closed circuit loop. Those are usually safe from these sort of things. If planes were falling, there's no way in hell that the satellites are intact. Space
Yeah.
stations would have shut down. It would be really cool to see. This is something that happened in another game that I really like in Fallout 76. I don't enjoy the game that much, but like I love the lore of Fallout. In 76, they had an intact space station fall in the world space, and it became a raider like settlement eventually. But there's some interesting lore about satellites falling, and even an astronaut that lived in space for 26 years crash landing and surviving after she landed, and she becomes a companion. I would love to see something like that. It'd be cool to see like a satellite that crashed and is mostly intact, but you can like salvage from it. I think
Hmm.
that'd be really cool. I don't
Oh
think
yeah.
an astronaut would survive, but like that would be a really interesting piece of story to add to the game. Is
Well,
an as
even
a
like on the
satellite or even
International
an
Space
astronaut.
Station, and I know China's got a space station up there too, and that they have capsules for,
Hmm.
to be able to leave the space station at a moment's notice
Yeah.
and go back down to Earth, but there's no recovery teams. There's no,
Hmm.
like our capsules end up in the water. Where are they going to go? And some of them, I
Yeah.
know, like the Russian ones, they land on land, but if anything goes wrong, and if you've been up in space for any great length of time, your body is so beaten up from, low gravity, you're not gonna be able to
Hmm.
walk very far. A lot of those people have to go through, heavy recovery periods. So, yeah, there's a whole lot of question mark things of like how many plane crashes across the planet and, the thing with the ships and yeah, it's gonna
Hmm.
be interesting to see how that lore plays out.
Yeah. Tobin said Milton canonically had over 100 residents, but in game there's only enough houses and infrastructure stuff for like a couple dozen people. So Milton's population is actually mentioned a lot in the lore. Its peak was in the 80s. It was at 1,000 actually, and by the 2000s it was down to 100, and by the time of Wintermute it's around a dozen. But Milton in game definitely does not reflect what's mentioned in the lore. I think Milton, if it was lore accurate, would cover the entirety of the Mountain Town region.
Hmm.
But most of the houses would have been deconstructed, would have fallen apart, burnt down because of the auroras. I think the in-game version does not reflect the peak, which was 1,000 people, which is
Yep.
basically like a fifth of my hometown. And this town's pretty big where I live.
And it's probably more just it reflects, the right at the collapse.
Hmm.
The smaller the mining has gone away, the town is withered and,
Hmm.
and nature has recaptured,
Yeah.
what was once neighborhoods and things. So,
Yeah.
yeah. The
If
other
you go,
aspect of that too is you have to remember too is when they were doing these games, all those things are assets that have to be built. So to make that game, you
mhm,
would have had to make this big map, and so some of that stuff has to be
yeah.
scaled back too to meet the necessary needs of the development too. So not
Hmm.
that that's
And
exciting to hear.
there there is an in-game explanation for why maybe there should be more houses, but there aren't. Islanders are tearing the infrastructure apart to salvage resources. So
Hmm.
there, if you go to Milton or Thompson's Crossing, there are buildings that look like they're being stripped apart from the inside. And it's mentioned in the lore that some islanders were doing that. That might also be happening to places like Last Resort or Hibernia or Carter even.
They're
Um,
cannibalizing other buildings to
yeah.
keep things that are
Hmm.
still viable, open,
Hmm.
and workable. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that
In the
that is a
lore, sorry, go ahead. Continue.
no. That was it.
Okay. Yeah, like in the lore, Hibernia is definitely open during the post-collapse era. So less than 10 years since Wintermute, but it looks like it's been abandoned for decades. I think people have just been stripping the place and it's just falling apart because of that. But yeah, that might be why Milton is much smaller than what it should look like. Anything else? I wanna make sure we got everything up above because we went on a tangent about flour.
There's always a tangent.
There's always a couple of them. Yeah, that's what the one monthly Q&A podcast
Oh
is for.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
There's
all
always
tangent.
it's all going into the
Yeah.
weeds.
Yeah,
That's what we're good for.
I did see a question about or a comment about the helicopter from the zone of contamination. Yeah, that was crashed at the time of the tail, so it's been there for quite a while.
Yeah, there has to be at least a 10 to 15-year period between when things were active and things were just
Hmm.
you're down to the nitty-gritty. The like what is it Jeremiah said the ones that were too stubborn to leave or were hiding from something. So you're down to the
Yeah,
nitty-gritty at that point.
yeah. Both episode 1 2 have, you know, an insight on how the islanders feel about like the people that live there. Grey Mother says that the only people that are on the island are too proud or too poor to leave. And Jeremiah does, yeah, say that anyone who's on the island is either hiding is probably hiding from something or someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very telling of those specific people. Like Grey Mother's definitely too proud to leave, and it's probably has something to do with the fact that she has a deep connection to something that happened around the island. So if she leaves, she's leaving Lily behind. Um, but she probably doesn't know that. I think that's just, something she's forgotten, obviously, because of her trauma. And Jeremiah, he's definitely hiding from something from his past. And it may have something to do with,
Well,
why he's
there's a lot of
why we're
notes
going to
about
Atwood.
him. Yeah, there's a lot of notes about him maybe being something from the military.
Hmm.
He knows something's going on in this whole, you got to carry this message and it's coded
Hmm.
and very interesting. Although I will say this because I know that this has been an overlapping question and you've brought it up and I know we've brought it up, but I was watching Zach's playthrough of episode 2 the other day, and
Hmm.
and during the conversation between him and Jeremiah, Will actually says that he's chasing his ex-wife. So we do
Oh,
know that they are divorced. I know that you have talked about
that might
that, and
have
we
been
don't know
something I
we
haven't, yeah, caught.
there is a conversation where where
Hmm.
Will's kind of going on this rant about you've got me doing X this and I'm chasing my ex-wife, and I was like, "Oh my goodness," because I know we've
That
talked
must have
about
flown
this,
over my head.
and it popped
That might
out.
have flown over my head somehow. In
So
episode 4, he does slip as well. When he's treating Franklin, he says, "I learned it from my I think he was about to say wife, and then he stops himself,
he stops
like
himself, but
almost slipped up." Yeah,
we always kind of, and I think
I
even Zach mentions that in
yeah.
the early part of his steal in episode 1, where he's saying wife, ex-wife, he wasn't sure, but there's that one little note in there where he definitively says ex-wife. He's
Mhm.
chasing his ex-wife across the Great Bear.
That's definitely something that's flown over my head. We knew they were together, but we just didn't know if they were still married.
Yeah,
I think
because they
that's
were
just
still talking
something
about the
that's
rings,
flown
and we
over.
know that the son
Hmm.
dying tore them apart and everything, but yeah.
Yeah,
So I thought I would note that because I saw that just the other day.
yeah. Thank you. I will definitely be doing a full playthrough after episode 5 releases. I want to do like a hard mode version, hard mode difficulty of the whole thing once I've wrapped up everything lore wise. So yeah, episode 2 is the one that I feel like I kind of don't pay attention to as much because it's the one I don't like the most. I really don't like it because it feels like it's just filler for the whole thing. Because I think when I did the recap, I think episode 2 is the shortest because there's just not a lot going on there. There's some important lore, but a lot of the episode is just filler, and I just don't pay attention, I guess. It's episode 3 and 4 where I definitely like them. I enjoy more. Sorry, episode 1 is my favorite so far, and I have my reasons for that.
I'm just going through chat here.
Not Briarhouse. I don't think Jeremiah is the trapper that it's talking about. And I think I know what you're talking about. I think you're mistaking it for Carter.
Here, let's read the
But
question out for
yeah,
anybody just listening. So
we also know that Jeremiah was probably contracted by Briarhouse to protect the workers from wolves or something. It was a small buffer memory. I know exactly what you're talking about, but it's not Carter, and I don't think it's Jeremiah. It was the skeleton crew hired a trapper to kill the wolves in the Winding River at Carter. But that would have been in the 90s. I don't think Jeremiah's been around for that long. That would have been 30 years. Take 30 years off of Jeremiah's current appearance. He was probably in the military in his 20s or something like that. Assuming he was in the military, which I think it's basically alluded to, yeah.
which I
He
think
has
we've
some
also
kind of
talked
military
about the
connection.
fact that the tail bunkers were ex-military as well. Anyway, so
Have I talked about that in a video?
I don't know if you've done them in a video, but I know we've talked about them on here.
No, I haven't. I've written it. It's in a script. It's one of my next videos.
Yeah.
And I did credit you for that because you did help a lot with that. We will, yeah, because I still need to do. I haven't covered Sundered Pass extensively, and I was gonna do a redo of my Far Territory history video, including Sundered Pass, and Yeah, that's like the big part of Underpass is the tech at the weather station. It's like the only way to figure out what period of time we're looking at here. And then that also, we had our little meeting that led to going to the bunkers and figuring out what's going on in there, which is all wrapped up in the same video. That's something that will come out in December, I think,
Yeah,
for
Tobin
sure.
just said he said he thinks Jeremiah can't be much older than 40s or 50s, which yeah,
Yeah,
if
I
you
agree.
tie that into when Carter was trying to be revitalized, that would he'd have been other places probably because
Yeah.
he seems like he's somewhere tied into the military, and he may be there
Hmm.
undercover, or he may be hiding because he was involved with things, and there's all sorts of things that we don't know the answers to that we might get some as we go.
There is a note in Camp Office in episode 2 that I think is talking about him because they mentioned there's a trapper that's breaking into the watchtower to like cure his hides or whatever. I think that's Jeremiah, but that's in episode 2. It's not a buffer memory.
And then I'll be the one that says, sorry if it's already been answered, but commented that the preppers have multiple bunkers if one was lost or raided. Yeah, and that could
Yeah.
be the answer to
Hmm.
why there's so many. They're backups to backups.
Yeah. Joplin had at least 3 in
Yeah.
episode 3. He might have had more, but he had at least 3. Um. Yeah. Anything else? What's the runtime here? We are
We're over time, but
over. Yeah.
Yeah, we're over.
I think
that
that's
doesn't
happened for
surprise me.
every
It
one
was
of
a good
my
subject.
episodes.
Yeah.
Hmm. Nadia, yes, I will be live later today. I think that was an older question.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts?
For me,
Hmm.
keep an eye out for water in the
Right.
lore. I mean, also keep out for the water. You don't want to fall in the water in the game. But yeah, going forward, when we get to episode 5, and maybe even in Black Frost, we never know. If you just learn the telltale signs of these diseases, have a fractured mind, forgetting everything, you're confusing things, you're having weird dreams, having trouble sleeping, or if you've been told to write to maintain your focus, that is more specific to the Langston mind. And you're also thinking about water, you're talking about water, you find comfort in water. All of those are the signs that we should be looking out for from now on. In episode 5, in Black Frost, wherever in this
Yeah.
franchise. Because if it's happened once or twice on Great Bear Island, I wouldn't be surprised if it's happened again elsewhere. Because I think what's happening with this disease/machine thing, we don't know what happened with Rudiger's data, but it definitely went to some entity. I'm thinking
Yes.
Umbrella Corporation levels of evil here.
Mhm.
So we never know if it happens in Black Frost. Just learn those telltale signs and keep them in mind from now on.
Red flags. Look for the red flags.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, and also for everyone, again, we do have a link to ToastyBits channel in the description, and then also to his playlist that is covering everything having to do with Sutherland. So if you are looking for that, following the episode, you can find it in the description.
And if there's anything you want to put in the comments, I'll make sure we pin it as well.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple of notes that I want to do before you do the sign off. So unless you've got something else.
Go for it.
Okay, so just a couple of quick channel notes. First and foremost, no show next week. So November 30th, we are taking off here in the States. It's Thanksgiving weekend. It's also Black Friday and all the nonsense that goes on with that. We figure a lot of you guys are going to be with your families and friends and stuff celebrating the holidays. So we're going to take the time off also to do the same. Then
Yep.
when we return on December 7th, we will have Sprocket Games with us. So he will be
Yeah.
joining us for a wonderful little chat
Hmm.
and that. And then beyond that, everything is kind of up in the air because we don't know what we're getting in the next couple of weeks. We may
Yeah.
be getting episode 5. We may be seeing some new drops because of the game awards and all that stuff. So we're going to leave everything kind of loose because we don't know what might be available to talk about as we get closer to Christmas and stuff. So anyway,
Mhm.
just November 30th, no show. Having a wonderful weekend, everybody, next week. And then on December 7th, when we come back, we will have Sprocket Games with us.
Yep.
And with that, I leave it to you.
All right. Thank you all so very much for joining us. Whether you were able to catch this show live or you're watching the recording, we greatly appreciate it. And we hope to see you next time. Bye bye.